In a valley forgotten by time, where mornings arrived shrouded in golden mists and the winds sang ancient melodies, there lived a donkey named Romeo. He was not the fastest, nor the strongest, nor the most cunning. But there was something about Romeo that no other animal in the valley seemed to have. Dreams too big to fit into his small, broken wooden stable. While the other donkeys in the region were content to just carry sacks of corn, cross trails, and rest under the shade of old fig trees, Romeo looked to the horizon and imagined a different life. He dreamed of having a house of his own, beautiful, made of strong stones, with a window facing the sunrise. He wanted to plant a garden full of colorful flowers and rest on a porch built with his own paws. Romeo believed that somehow, even without knowing how, he could achieve all of that. But dreaming in that valley was a kind of silent provocation. Whenever Romeo talked about his plans, the other animals would shake their heads, sigh, or even laugh. "You are but a donkey, Romeo," some said. "This is not for us. Fine houses are for summer swallows or city men, not for us beasts of burden." Romeo tried not to be shaken. Each dawn was a new opportunity, he thought. He tried to gather branches to start building the structure of the house, but a wind would knock everything down. He tried to carry stones to make the foundation, but his paws would get tired. Before the first row was ready, he tried to plant flower seeds, but the rabbits would come at night and take everything away. Each unsuccessful attempt was a new wound to his pride, but also a reminder of how much he wanted to change his destiny. On one of those days, while Romeo was gathering the stones scattered by yet another frustrated attempt to build something solid, he heard a laugh coming from the top of the trees. It was Tito, the most talkative and mocking monkey the valley had ever known. With his smart eyes and agile tail, Tito would descend from the branches with the lightness of someone who had never had to carry more than his own cleverness. Quote, "Well, well, look who we found here," said the monkey, swinging on a vine as he pointed at Romeo. The great architect of the valley, the builder of wind castles, Romeo, sweating and with his hooves dirty with mud, just sighed. He was used to being the butt of jokes, but this time something in Tito's tone seemed sharper, colder. Tito approached, jumping from stone to stone, until he was facing Romeo. With a mischievous smile, he put his hand on the donkey's shoulder and said, "Give up, Romeo. Seriously, dreaming is beautiful, but it's useless. You'll never be able to build a house of your own. This is not for those who are born to carry burdens for others. It's better to accept it now." Quote. Those words fell like a silent thunder inside Romeo's heart. For a moment, he felt like giving up everything right there. Who was he to want something so big? He was just a donkey. An ordinary donkey, with no special talents, no luck, no help. Tito's voice echoed in his mind like a sentence. "This is not for you. It is not for you." Romeo, however, did not answer. He just lowered his head and stared at his dirty paws. He did not know what to do. He was exhausted. His strength seemed as fragile as the stone towers he was trying to build. As fragile as his dreams in the face of the harsh words he had heard. The sky, once so blue, now seemed gray and heavy on his shoulders. But deep down, almost like a forgotten ember under the ashes, there was still something lit inside him, a small, almost imperceptible spark of hope. He did not know if he would have the strength to try again, but he also did not know if he would be able to live forever with the doubt of what could have happened if he had insisted one more time. This was the crossroads that Romeo now faced. Two paths before him: give up and accept a life of conformity, or move forward, even without any guarantee of success. With his eyes closed, Romeo took a deep breath. Life seemed to whisper, "The choice is his." And it really was. No one could live this dream for him. No one could carry that desire in his place. It was now or never. Romeo's story was about to change, but he didn't know it yet. Little did he know that sometimes the biggest dreams are given to those who seem least capable, because they are the ones who, by achieving them, prove that the impossible is only the possible, that it hasn't been tried enough yet. Romeo woke up different that day. His eyes, which always held a shy gleam of hope, now carried a new weight, a mixture of pain and stubbornness. He no longer wanted to be the butt of laughter, but he also couldn't simply abandon what made his heart beat faster. So, with firm, albeit slow, steps, he decided to start over. Before anything else, he needed to understand a truth that was painful to accept. There was no point in just dreaming. He had to learn. He had to change the way he fought. For the first time, instead of carrying stones aimlessly, Romeo sat in the shade of a tree and observed what the valley had to teach him. He saw how the ants, so small, organized their construction with patience and strategy. He saw how the beavers, even without rushing, built their solid homes next to the river. Romeo understood. Haste and brute force were not enough. Wisdom was needed. Quote. He then decided to take a step back so he could move forward firmly. He began to visit the most hidden corners of the valley, where wise old animals lived far from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. He talked to Mr. Crow, who taught him about choosing the right place to build. He listened to Mrs. Turtle, who explained the importance of building a strong foundation, even if it took a long time. Romeo wrote everything down in his memory, like someone collecting small gold nuggets. Each piece of advice, each old story he heard was an invisible brick that was already beginning to build inside him, what would one day become his real home. The greatest transformation, however, was not visible to the eyes. While Romeo's body remained the same, his mind and heart grew, matured, and grew stronger in silence. However, not everything was a peaceful learning experience. Wherever he went, Romeo continued to be the subject of malicious comments. Some animals would make fun of him. "Look there, the dreaming donkey has now become a student," they would say with laughter. Others, like Tito, the monkey, made a point of showing up to remind him that time spent dreaming is time wasted. Many nights, Romeo would lie on his old straw, staring at the leaky roof of his stable, and feel doubt creeping back into his mind. Were they right? Was he just wasting his days with illusions? At such times, Romeo remembered the reason for everything, the sincere desire to have a place to call his own, to prove to himself that he was not born just to carry the burden of others, but also to build his own path. Determined not to be shaken, Romeo set out on his first great plan. To build the foundation of the house before the next season arrived. It would be quite a challenge, for the autumn rains were strong and relentless in the valley. But he was no longer alone in his will. Now he carried in his chest the voices of the wise, the patience of the ants, the strategy of the beavers, and the silent faith he had rediscovered within himself. The next day, before the sun had even touched the horizon, Romeo woke up, ate some leaves in a hurry, and set off to work. Each stone he carried was carefully placed in the right place. Each hole he dug was measured, planned, without shortcuts, without haste. For the first time, his effort had direction, it had purpose. Time passed, and little by little a firm foundation began to rise in the chosen clearing. It was neither grand nor impressive to those who looked from afar, but for Romeo every inch of ground conquered was a victory against everything that was said to be impossible. Sometimes he would stop for a few minutes to breathe, looking at what he had done, and a shy smile would appear on his tired face. He felt something different inside him, a pride that no one could take away. Even though the house was still a distant dream, Romeo had already achieved something much greater. The certainty that, step by step, stone by stone, he was also building the best of himself. Little did he know that the greatest test was yet to come, and that not all of his effort would be immediately recognized. As the foundation of the house took shape, the resistance of those who did not believe also grew. Tito, realizing that the mockery was no longer having much effect, decided to act in a more cruel way. One day, while Romeo went out to get more stones in the mountains, Tito and his cronies invaded the clearing. With loud laughter and gestures of contempt, they tore down a good part of the foundation, scattering stones, trampling on what Romeo had built with so much effort. When Romeo returned and saw the destruction, his heart almost stopped. It was as if everything he had achieved had been blown away by the wind. He stood there, motionless, looking at the devastated scene. The feeling of helplessness crushed him. For the first time in a long time, Romeo seriously considered giving up for good. The sky began to darken, announcing a storm. The first drops of rain touched the dry earth, while Romeo still remained motionless, his eyes filled with tears that he refused to let fall. Life seemed to scream that he was not strong enough, that no matter how hard he tried, there would always be someone to knock him down. And it was at that moment, on that threshold between continuing or giving up, that Romeo's true story began to be written, not by the strength of his hooves, nor by the hardness of the stones, but by the invisible resistance that few have, the ability to get back up, even when everything around seems to collapse. The storm that fell that night seemed like a perfect translation of Romeo's soul, agitated, confused and full of fears. The waters washed the ground of the clearing, scattering even more the stones that, with so much effort, he had arranged. However, as the sky fell, something inside Romeo began to silently grow stronger. For the first time, he understood that it was not the house that was his greatest goal, it was who he was becoming in the process. It was about courage, resilience, about the kind of strength that only comes from those who, even after so many falls, still choose to get up. When the next morning arrived, with a shy sun piercing the clouds, Romeo got up. His muscles ached, his eyes were tired, but his steps were determined. More than ever, he knew. He could not give up. Without waiting, Romeo started work again. He rebuilt the fallen foundation, stone by stone, now even firmer. Each blow of the improvised hammer echoed not only in the valley, but also in his heart. However, as his house began to take shape again, the challenges also became harder. Physical obstacles were not enough. Now there were also those who appeared with words as sharp as thorns. One day, while Romeo was balancing a heavy beam on his back, he was surprised by the presence of an elegant fox named Lorena. Known throughout the valley for her cunning and sharp tongue, Lorena approached with silent steps and a false smile drawn on her face. "Romeo. Romeo, you poor donkey," she said, shaking her head pitifully. "Can't you see? All this effort is useless. Donkeys don't build houses. That's work for more refined animals. For someone born with talent, with intelligence, you should accept your humble nature, Romeo. Don't waste your life trying to be what you can never be." Quote. Her words entered Romeo's mind like barbs. They were beautiful words, spoken in a sweet voice, but loaded with venom. And perhaps, if it had been in another time, Romeo would have believed her. He would have lowered his head and gone back to being just another one among so many, carrying burdens that didn't belong to him. But Romeo had suffered too much to turn back. He took a deep breath, smelling the wet earth, mixed with the sweat of his effort, and answered with his voice still trembling but firm, "Maybe you're right, Lorena. Maybe I wasn't born for this, but if I don't try, I'll never know who I could become." Quote. And with that, Romeo turned and continued his work. Each beat of his paws against the ground was now a silent scream against the limitations imposed by others and against the doubts that still insisted on being born within him. The following days were a true battle. As the summer progressed, the heat made the work unbearable. Romeo carried stones under the scorching sun, feeling his strength drain away with each trip. At night, the pain in his paws was so intense that he could barely lie down to rest. At various times, the thought of giving up would return, whispering like a shadow in his ear. But Romeo had learned that big dreams require great sacrifices, and he was willing to pay the price. The malicious comments didn't stop either. Sometimes, Romeo could hear the laughter of Tito and his friends in the distance, mocking his efforts. Other times it was the thin, venomous voice of Lorena, who echoed along the trails. Building dreams is a luxury for few. Each word seemed like one more stone in his path. But Romeo had decided that, if he had to, he would carry them all and still build his house with them. One day, exhausted after hours of hard work, Romeo sat under the shade of a tree and looked at what he had achieved so far. The structure was already visible. It was not perfect. There were flaws, there were marks of struggle, but it was real. It was no longer just a dream stuck in his head. It was something he could touch, something he could feel under his paws. And at that moment he understood a profound truth. No matter what anyone says, no matter how many times life tries to knock you down, what matters is how many times you choose to start over. Over time, other animals began to notice something different in Romeo. It was not just the house that appeared where before there was only empty land. It was the invisible strength that grew inside him, the strength of those who refuse to accept the limits that the world tries to impose. Some, in silence, began to admire him. Others, still trapped in fear and envy, continued to try to discourage him. But Romeo no longer cared. He was so focused on what he was building that the negative voices became just distant noise. And so, stone by stone, beam by beam, dream by dream, Romeo continued, facing each challenge, each cruel word, each look of disdain. His body grew tired, but his soul grew stronger and stronger. Deep down, he knew that his fight was not just for a house, it was a fight for dignity, for hope. It was a fight to prove that sometimes what matters most is not who you are at the beginning of the journey, but who you become at the end of it. The day of the great turning point was approaching, the moment when Romeo would have to face his greatest challenge, where all his effort would be put to the test in a way he could never have imagined. But he didn't know it yet. All Romeo knew was that as long as he had the strength to take one more step, he would keep going. And deep down in his heart, each beat said, "Keep going, Romeo, keep going." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The once empty little plot of land now housed something that many in the valley had never imagined seeing. Romeo's house was simple, of course. It had no luxurious adornments or tall towers, like the beavers' buildings on the river. But every stone in that house, every piece of wood, carried a story. It carried sweat, tears, and, above all, dreams. And it was just when the structure was almost ready that life, capricious as always, decided to test Romeo one last time. The news spread quickly. A huge storm, the biggest in recent years, was approaching the valley. Strong winds, relentless rain, and the risk of landslides. It was as if nature, in a final blow, wanted to ask, "Do you really deserve what you built?" Romeo listened to the warnings. Some animals ran to safe shelters, others reinforced their already solid homes. Tito, the monkey, didn't miss the chance to mock once again. "That fragile little house of yours will fly away with the first breath of the wind," he shouted from the top of a tree. Lorena, the fox, also made a point of appearing, saying, "That's what I was trying to save you from, Romeo. Now you're going to lose everything." Quote. The words, cold as the wind, which was already beginning to blow, cut like blades. But Romeo, unlike everyone else, didn't run away, didn't run. He stood there in front of his house, in front of his dream, willing to protect it with everything he had. If he was going to lose, he would lose it fighting. If he was going to start over, he would do it with dignity. When the storm arrived, it was as if the entire sky had collapsed over the valley. Lightning lit up the dark night and the sound of the wind sounded like the roar of an ancient monster. Romeo used his body as a shield, pressing against the walls of the house, supporting the beams, holding the makeshift doors with his own strength. Each thunder that split the sky was another challenge. Each gust of wind that threatened to topple the structure was a silent fight that Romeo fought alone. The storm seemed endless. The water invaded everything. Mud ran down the trails. The trees swayed frighteningly, but Romeo didn't give in. He gritted his teeth, planted his paws on the ground, and held on. He held on not only to his house, he held on to his dream, he held on to the promise he had made to himself that he would not give up, no matter what. When the first ray of sunlight finally broke through the dark clouds, Romeo was exhausted. His legs were shaking, his body ached in every fiber, but he was still standing. And to his surprise, so was his house. It had resisted, not perfectly, of course. Some parts were damaged, there were leaks and holes, but it was there, firm, real. Romeo fell to his knees in the mud, not out of weakness, but out of gratitude. He cried out everything he had held on to for months. He cried out of pain, out of fear, out of humiliation, out of the times he had almost given up, but most of all he cried out of happiness. For the first time, Romeo felt with all clarity that he had won. Little by little, the other animals began to come out of their hiding places. And when they saw that Romeo's house had resisted, a different silence took over the valley. It was no longer the silence of mockery, it was the silence of respect. Tito, embarrassed, slipped into his group of friends, trying to pretend that he had never doubted. Lorena, with her tail between her legs, disappeared among the trees, and Romeo didn't need to say anything. His house spoke for him, his courage spoke for him. His example was now a beacon for all who had ever felt too small, too weak, too incapable. In the days that followed, something incredible happened. Animals that had previously mocked him began to approach him, curious. They wanted to know how Romeo had done it. They wanted to learn. They wanted to build their own dreams. And Romeo, with the humility that had always guided him, welcomed everyone. He taught what he knew, shared his experiences, and showed that the secret was not in brute force or cleverness, but in the silent perseverance of those who believe they can be more than the world says. And so, the story of Romeo, the dreaming donkey, became a legend in the valley. Not a legend of miracles or grandiose deeds, but a legend of truth, of courage, of Anna, of faith in oneself. Romeo never forgot what he faced, he never erased from his memory the harsh words, the falls, the storms, but he also never let these memories be a reason to stop. On the contrary, he used each scar as a medal, each tear as fuel, each defeat as a step to climb even higher. In the end, Romeo understood something that few understand: dreams are not given. They are built with effort, with pain, with patience, with faith, and those who dare to build, even with the whole world saying no, end up discovering something even more valuable than the realization of their dreams. They discover the greatness that has always existed within them. Romeo's story is much more than the simple journey of a donkey who wanted to build a house. It is a mirror of the lives of all of us. In every stone that Romeo carried, in every word of discouragement that he had to face, there is a piece of the silent battles that we all fight inside our hearts. Because dreaming is easy, everyone dreams. But getting up every day to fight for those dreams, even without guarantees of success, even hearing the world shout that you are not capable, that is something few have the courage to do. Romeo teaches us that the true value of a dream is not only in what it represents, but in who we become along the way to achieve it. How many times, just like Romeo, have you found yourself carrying a project, a plan, a desire in your heart and encountered those along the way who tried to make you stop? The words of Tito and Lorena are the same ones that we often hear from friends, family, or even strangers. You are not capable. This is not for you. Accept life as it is. And the great tragedy is that we often believe these words. We accept the limits that others impose on us as if they were an absolute truth. We believe that because someone doesn't see our potential, we really don't have it. But Romeo's journey screams at us. We are the ones who define our limits. Of course, the path is not easy. What Romeo faced, the storm, the fatigue, the discouragement, are perfect metaphors for the difficulties of real life. There are days when it seems like everything is conspiring against us, when the burden is too heavy, when the temptation to give up seems more comfortable than continuing. And you know what? It's okay to feel afraid, it's okay to feel weak. What matters is what we do afterward. Romeo trembled, Romeo cried. Romeo felt physical and emotional pain, but he didn't stop. And that is one of the most powerful lessons we can learn. Strength is not in never falling. Strength is in refusing to stay down. Another profound lesson that Romeo's story teaches us is about the difference between what the world values and what really matters. Tito, Lorena, and so many others valued status, appearance, and ease. They mocked Romeo's house because it would never be perfect enough, big enough, or beautiful enough. They measured success through comparison. But Romeo knew that his house, with all its imperfections, was the symbol of his struggle, his resistance, and his story. And there is nothing more precious than what we build with our own hands, even if no one else understands its value. We often waste energy trying to please others, trying to reach standards that don't even make sense to us. Romeo shows us that true achievement is internal, that true victory is being true to what we believe in, even when we are alone. He didn't build his house to prove something to Tito or to impress Lorena. He built it because he knew deep down that this was what gave meaning to his existence. How many of us could free ourselves from pain, anxiety, and fear if we understood that true validation does not come from outside, but from within? It is also impossible to ignore the importance of silent persistence. Romeo did not make fiery speeches. He did not try to convince anyone that he could do it. He simply acted, worked in silence, suffered in silence, believed in silence. And in the end, it was his example, not his words, that transformed the way others see us in a world where everyone wants to prove something all the time, where appearances often weigh more than essence. Romeo teaches us that true strength does not need to be advertised. It manifests itself in daily actions, in small steps, in the invisible bricks that we lay every day without anyone seeing. And perhaps the most moving lesson of all is in the way Romeo dealt with his obstacles. He did not curse the storm, he did not look for someone to blame, he did not hold resentment for the harsh words he heard. He understood that everything was part of the journey, that each difficulty was an opportunity to grow even stronger. And this makes us think, how many times do we complain about the headwinds, without realizing that they are the ones that shape the wings we need to fly? When we look at Romeo's story, we realize that in life, it is not always the fastest, the smartest, or the most talented who win. Often, the winners are those who simply do not give up. Those who, even when discredited, even when injured, even when tired, continue planting, continue building, continue believing. And it is in this kind of spirit that true greatness resides. Therefore, the question that remains for all of us is simple, but profound. In the face of difficulties, of no's, of falls, of storms, who do you choose to be? Will you be like Titus, who gives up on dreaming and mocks those who still try? Or will you be like Romeo, who understands that dreams are not for the weak, but for those who have the courage to get up once, twice, 1,000 times, if necessary? Being like Romeo is a daily challenge. It's not a decision you make once and that's it, everything will be resolved. Being like Romeo requires small and constant choices. Believing in yourself when your inner voice screams that you're not capable. Working on your project even when no one else believes in it. Taking another step when your strength seems exhausted. And most importantly, building and continuing to build, even when a storm is already looming on the horizon. Because what really sets people who make dreams come true apart from those who just daydream is the willingness to keep going, especially on days when everything seems impossible. The world will always have Titos and Lorenas. There will always be those who try to discourage you, who laugh at your boldness, who say that it's not really like that it's better to accept what you have. And what Romeo shows us is that these voices often reflect the fears and frustrations of those who speak them. Tito mocked because he himself had given up on his dreams a long time ago. Lorena criticized because deep down she was afraid of trying and failing. It is easier to point out the mistakes of others than to face our own inertia. It is more comfortable to laugh at those who struggle than to get up and fight too. That is why Romeo teaches us something precious. Do not accept advice from those who have never had the courage to try. Not everyone who speaks knows what they are talking about. Not everyone who discourages you is trying to protect you. Some simply cannot stand to see someone daring to do what they themselves never had the strength to try. Romeo did not let himself be contaminated. He heard. He felt, but he did not allow those words to become truths within him. He followed his inner compass, his vision, his silent hope, and that was exactly what made all the difference. Another great lesson from this story is that true victory is silent. It does not need applause, it does not need recognition. It happens first within us. When Romeo saw his house standing after the storm, he did not run to boast, he did not seek the spotlight. He cried with gratitude, he cried for the journey, he cried because he knew that every drop of sweat, every tear, every lonely night had been worth it. And this is something we all need to understand. The true taste of achievement does not come from the approval of others, but from the peace we feel when we know that we did our best, that we were true to what we believed in. And the most beautiful thing of all is that Romeo, even after being humiliated and discredited, chose to share his knowledge, he chose to teach, he chose to welcome. He could have closed himself off, he could have become bitter, he could have said, "Now that I have made it, each one for himself." But no. Romeo understood that true greatness is not only in winning alone, but in helping others to win too. He transformed his pain into wisdom and his story into hope for many others. And this is another great lesson. Our suffering, when understood and overcome, can become a source of healing for the world around us. Sometimes, your dream goes beyond you. Sometimes, your achievement will inspire someone you don't even know. Your silent struggle can light the flame of courage in someone else's heart. Like a stone thrown into water, your actions create ripples that spread far beyond what you can see. And Romeo, with his simple home, his unwavering faith, and his generous spirit, became exactly that, a wave of transformation that forever changed the valley and the lives of everyone who lived there. But to experience this transformation, you have to be willing to pay the price. You have to accept that there will be days when you will feel alone, days when no one will applaud you, days when you will even doubt whether it is worth continuing. Romeo had those days, we all do. The difference is in how we choose to respond to them. The difference is in not allowing discouragement to be greater than the dream. It is in understanding that each step, no matter how small it may seem, is still progress. That each stone placed, each effort made, is building something invisible, but real. Your story of overcoming. Life is not about having the path made easy. Life is about becoming strong enough to walk, even when the ground is rough, even when the sky threatens to fall on your head. Romeo became strong, not because he wanted to be admired, but because he understood that his strength was necessary for his dream to come true. He understood that in the journey of dreamers, obstacles are not barriers, but rather training. Each difficulty shapes, strengthens, and teaches. Each no we hear is an opportunity to reaffirm the yes we carry in our hearts. And perhaps this is the deepest question that Romeo's story leaves us with. What is your yes? What is that dream, that desire, that flame that burns inside you, but that you so often try to ignore out of fear, shame, or tiredness? Are you willing to face the storms that will come? Are you ready to be called a fool, a dreamer, or naive, and still continue? Are you prepared to build your house, even if no one else can see it at first? Because in the end, life rewards those who have the courage to stay. It rewards those who plant invisible seeds today to harvest forests tomorrow. And Romeo's story is a powerful reminder that even when everything seems difficult, even when the voice of discouragement seems louder, there will always be a greater strength within you, a deeper voice that knows you were born to win. If Romeo's story touched your heart, if in some way it made you remember a forgotten dream or rekindled the courage within you, then I ask you, do not keep this message to yourself. Share this video with someone special, someone you know also needs to hear that it is possible, that they are not alone, that there is still hope. And if this story has found a home within your heart, leave your like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because here, with each new video, we walk together, always remembering that, no matter how difficult the storms are, dreaming and building is what makes us alive. Never stop believing, never stop trying, because your home, your dream is already waiting for you.